Welcome Vegas newbies, Vegas vets, and everyone in between. This is Josh with Big Slick Vegas. And for today's video, and I'm going to start a series of different videos. It's basically frequently asked questions regarding Las Vegas. I see these all the time on social medias, particularly on Facebook and the various different Vegas Facebook groups that I belong to. Where should I stay at? What's the best hotel to stay at? How should I get from the airport to the strip? How should I what's the temperature like? What's the best time to visit in Vegas? What are the best shows? What's the best restaurants to eat at? And of course, a lot of those questions are really subjective. But so for these series of different videos I'm going to do over the next few weeks, we're going to try and address them um, here from video to video. And the first one I'm going to do is the first thing we often hear is what's the best time to stay in Vegas? And there's no really good question to that. I think that a lot of it just depends on how much you're willing to spend and what kind of weather you want to get out, what your favorite type of weather is. So just to go through it real quick, when we're talking about the weather and what the weather's going to be like when you go to Las Vegas, if you're going through, say, December, January, and February, these are going to be the cooler months. And one thing I want to say is, too, before I go any further, is oftentimes most people like to think that because Las Vegas is in the desert, it's hot year-round. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Because in the months of December, January, and February, it's actually pretty cool. You'll normally see highs, typically on average in the 60s, maybe even the 50s during those months, with lows getting down in the 30s at night, maybe even below freezing. And it's not totally uncommon to get a little bit of rain during those months. And yes, it might even snow during those months. Not a whole lot. If you're someone from, say, Michigan, Minnesota, Buffalo, New York, wherever, particularly someplace up north, it's not going to be nothing to you for the most part compared to how bad the snow can be in those places, or especially if you're coming in from Canada. If you're coming in from Canada, you're going to think it's summer during those months. But that's typically what the weather is, so you definitely want to kind of dress in layers. Make sure you have a jacket or a hoodie or so forth. Keep in mind, during the winter months, casinos really kind of keeps it kind of warm inside, so you'll be taking it in and out as you're going outside and inside. During March, the weather's typically it's one of the better months. You'll normally start seeing it highs in the 70s, maybe might even hit 80s. For the most part, it's going to be in the 70s. It'll cool off once again at night, maybe not as cold during the winter months. Then as you get into April and May, that's when you're going to start seeing highs in the 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s, particularly as you get into May. When you get in June, that's when it starts really heating up. That's when you can see highs vary from the 90s, and it might even get in the hundreds during June. Very rarely, there's one week I was in Vegas during June, and really the highs were only in the 80s, but that's kind of a rarity. For the most part, they're going to be in the 90s and the hundreds. Because it is in the desert, it still kind of cools off a little bit at night to where it's pretty comfortable. So a lot of it kind of depends on yourself. If you're someone who parties all night and sleeps all day, it won't be much of a factor for you. Now, as you get into July and August, that's when it really heats up. You're definitely going to see temperatures in the hundreds every day. You might even it's probably going to get into the 110s, 1 teens, possibly. And even at night, it's probably going to maybe get down into the 90s. So those are like the hottest months to stay in Vegas. So that's something to keep in mind, to think about. Once you get into September, it starts cooling off. You're still going to have plenty of days probably in the hundreds. But as you get closer into the month, as it goes on, it'll start cooling down in the 90s and 80s. Then once you get into October, once again, it's pretty comfortable in the 80s, highs in the 70s. And then as you get into November, it'll be in the pretty much in the 70s most of the month. And like I say, you can allow from about a 20 to 30 degree cool down overnight, particularly when you get into the fall, winter, and early spring. Now, what's the best time to actually stay in Vegas? Well, once again, that just depends on yourself. I just went down to tell you about what the temperatures and what the weather's going to be like. When it comes to pricing in Vegas, typically, if you got a major holiday weekend or a holiday, especially if it does fall on the weekend, prices are going to be a lot higher. New Year's Eve is probably the highest you're going to pay as far as hotel rates go. Super Bowl weekend is also high, as well as right around St. Patrick's Day and around the time that March Madness starts. That first week or weekend of March Madness, NCAA basketball tournament, sometimes rates can be pretty high. Same thing goes for Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, 4th of July. Rates can be a little bit higher on those nights. Probably not as high as, say, New Year's Eve or the Super Bowl, but they can still be a little bit higher. Also, if there is a UFC event or any type of professional boxing, sometimes rates will be a little bit higher. Normally, mainly around where MGM Grand is, because that's where most of those events are taking place. And also keep in mind that on weekends, Friday and Saturday night rates are typically going to be double than what you're going to pay during the week, Sunday through Thursday. Some of the cheapest times of the year would be from right about Thanksgiving through Christmas. Those are the two holidays where rates are going to be pretty cheap, and in between and maybe a little bit before, a little bit after. That's when you'll normally see rates ridiculously cheap. So that's something to think about. One thing too, getting back to the weather, during those winter months, if you're a pool person, most of the pools are going to be shut down. I think there's only maybe a few pools between downtown and the Strip that are going to still be open. I know Circa downtown, I know their pool is open all year round. At the Cosmopolitan, their pool closes, but during the wintertime, they open one of the pool areas up as an ice rink. So that's just a little side note for you to think about. Also, another cheap time of the year, pretty much in January, in between, after New Year's, in between that and around February, when the Super Bowl hits, right in that area is also pretty cheap. And then after the Super Bowl, till about the rest of February is also, the rates typically tend to be kind of cheaper. One thing too, getting back to the hotter months, and really this applies to all year round, the sun is pretty hot there in Vegas. Yes, it's a dry heat, but to me, hot is hot. Always make sure you have some sunblock available with you. Nothing's worse than getting a sunburn, especially if you're hanging out at the pool. You also want to make sure you stay hydrated. Including myself, everyone likes to have our fair share of adult beverages while we're in Vegas, but make sure you're drinking plenty of water, particularly during the summer months when it is hot, because nothing's worse than being on vacation and getting dehydrated. And speaking of water, where are some of the best spots to actually go purchase not only bottled water, but any other type of drinks or snacks that you want to have for your hotel room while you're staying in Vegas? I would certainly avoid, and this is a good tip for saving some money, avoid if your room happens to have a mini bar, stay away from it, because typically the prices on those items are probably 5 times than what you really should be paying. I would typically avoid going to any of the stores or gift shops that are inside the hotel for those type of items, because they're going to probably be 2 or 3 times more than you would if you go to a regular store. And that brings me to where you should go to buy such items, whether it's beer, water, soft drinks, snacks. There are plenty of Walgreens and CVS's up and down the Strip, ABC stores you'll see. If you're downtown on Fremont Street, there's plenty of small little souvenir stands that are also selling bottles of water, drinks, and so forth. So those are the places you want to go in case you want to save some money, because there's no sense in paying $5 for a bottle of water when you can get for $1 or $2 a bottle. So also, along with that too, if you're staying at a room, if some of the rooms at the hotels will have mini fridges for your own personal use. Some of them don't. Typically, all the MGM room hotels do not have mini fridges, but a lot of the Caesars do. I know the Sahara does, and just about all the places downtown do. But in case you do want to keep your drinks cold, most hotel rooms do have ice buckets. Or what you can do is you can go to one of these places, like I mentioned, the Walgreens, the CVS. There's also too a Target, also on the strip, and just get one of those. Like after you check in your room, go ahead and go over there. You can get like a styrofoam cooler, cheap one, disposable one. You can keep that in your room too if your room doesn't contain a mini fridge, and then that way you can just leave it when you go ahead and check out and let room service, or not room service, but the housekeeping take care of it, and they can throw that away for you. One few other little tips too is you're going to see a lot of people as you're walking down the strip, especially. It's not as bad on Fremont Street, that will come up to you and say, hey, would you like a free ticket to a show tonight? Or do you want a voucher for this restaurant, and so forth, and all kinds of deals. Those are basically timeshare people. Now, the last time I went to Vegas last summer, I didn't see any of them out there, but from what I'm hearing on social media, they're starting to come back out of the woodworks. They're going to basically come up to you, and they typically, if you're single and you're just traveling solo, you probably won't have to worry about it. But if you're coming in as a couple, they see two people together, they're going to zero in on you. And the way they'll start it off, they'll ask you, hey, how long are you staying in Vegas for? Would you like this? And what they want you to do is in order to get these fun little items, they want you to attend one of their timeshares. And it's basically, they'll tell you it's only an hour, 2 hour presentation, and you're not obligated to buy anything, which technically, legally, you're not. But typically, these timeshare presentations typically last from anywhere from 2, 3, maybe 4 hours of your time. And I don't think it's worth it as far as what you get from everything. It is kind of a high pressure sale type of thing. So I just don't think it's worth it for you to spend 4 or 5 hours at a presentation. I've done one of these things before, me and my wife did, and it took up probably about 4 or 5 hours of our day, and it's not worth it for what you get back from return. The best thing to do if they approach you, first thing they'll say is, hey, how long are you in Vegas for? I would tell them immediately, well, we actually live here, and we're just coming up the strip to hang out, or we're having a little staycation here on the strip. They'll typically leave you alone. If they think you're a local, they're not going to bother you after that. Or you could be rude and just tell them to fuck off. One of the two, but typically the first thing they're just tell them you're a local. They'll leave you alone right away. Another thing too, you're going to see a lot on the strip and downtown. You'll see a lot of street performers. These are people who are dressed up as various different characters. Could be Marvel characters, Star Wars characters, horror characters, Vegas showgirls. And they're out there, and they may entice you to go ahead and take a picture with them. Keep in mind, they're not doing this just for the fun of it. They're going to want some money in return. So keep in mind, if you want to take a picture of them, go ahead. Not going to tell you not to, but it can be anywhere between $5 for taking a picture with them up to $20. So, and maybe even more than that. So just consider that. And that is pretty much most of the what I have for today on this video. On the next video, we're going to talk about transportation in Vegas, as far as how to get to the airport, what the best way to get from the airport to the strip, and so forth, whether you should rent a car. We'll go through that on my next video. So in the meantime, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next video. Thank you.